Okay. So, Alex Hadzic, that is. Are we live on LinkedIn?
It says live, but I'm still waiting for the video. We'll let you know. No worries.
This is what
but it says live.
This is our 10th LinkedIn Live, and every time we hold our breath and just hope it works. Because we go Zoom to StreamYard to LinkedIn Live. Hello, Phil. Welcome. Right. Alex, let's make the most of this session. So we've put an hour in the diary, and we'll see how much time we want to need in this. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. We got chatting recently and talked about some of the intention, ideas, objectives that you have as a forward-thinking college around artificial intelligence. A lot of these things that we'll talk about today are part of your broader strategy. They're not necessarily things that you've done yet, but perhaps for those folks who don't know you, Alex, you could do a short introduction to your work.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Richard, and good afternoon, everyone. So Alex Denley, I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Harrow, Richmond and Uxbridge Colleges. I've been in post a little under 9 months now, but really come in to pick up the underlying technology stack that makes up our college group, trying to streamline that in terms of unlocking data and using the data to ultimately drive some of our decision making. And really, whereas I say, with all things relevant in terms of technology at the moment, AI is at the forefront of all the conversations I have within all of the colleges, but certainly when it comes to any engagement with peers, as well as all technology providers at the moment. So Richard and I, as I say, got chatting over the last couple of weeks, really, and I've referenced some of the things that I'm looking to strategically implement over here at our West London College Group. And the opportunities and the value that we can unlock with the advancements of AI is really exciting. I think at the moment we've got a huge amount of requirements and backlog of activities that we can do to free up our operational teams to do what they do best at, subject matter expertise. So operational efficiencies, driving student engagement. And hopefully, ultimately, so to say, improving the underlying student experience and graduate outcomes. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to enlightening you all a little bit more about some of my thinking.
Yeah, likewise. And a little bit more on your background before you were working at HRUC. What are some of the places you've worked so people might think, oh, that's where I know Alex from?
Yeah, so it is and so certainly in technology it is. So if you do recognise me, so prior to being at HRUC, I've been at London South Bank University for the last 7.5 years. I had a moving from HE over to FE, and I did a huge amount of work there in similar concepts and principles. But really, just to say, went on a journey from the point of walking through the doors of the university to a complex landscape, people, the process, and the technology, all the three principles, but effectively trying to streamline the underlying technology stack to enable digital transformation. And most recently, what I was doing just ahead of leaving there was really looking at the whole concept of attendance, physical attendance, and digital engagement. I think a lot of the university was very much kind of looking in terms of trying to understand student outcomes by whether they physically turned up to lectures, classes, whether that's physically or online. But they weren't really looking at other levels of engagement when it came around to some of the digital technologies that they were interacting with. So I did a heap of stuff with that, and also built that into a CRM. We were using Salesforce there, and I guess we can coin the phrase of trying to, as I say, understand a 360 view of the student, right from becoming as a prospective student, going for that applicant, that enrolment journey. Through their life cycle of studying there, but equally also understanding them as they went through the alumni experience as well. So say similar challenges, similar technology stack, and really, as I say, trying to apply these principles in the colleges as well. Before that, it was actually a lot of it was around, as I say, I worked in the theme park world, and I also worked in 5-star hospitality and with technology. And it was always about, as I put it, knowing what the customer wants ahead of them asking for it. Unintrusively knowing insights about them as an individual that enhance their experience. And that was really utilising the technology to try and build up a picture of them to drive that repeat visitation. And when I moved over to education, it was very similar kind of customer service when it came around to delivering operational activities for our students. streamline that technology stack so we could actually have everyone on a single kind of platform. And ultimately, that would also drive our thinking when it came to business strategy as well. So yeah, that's there you go. A little bit about me and my background.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, and it sounds like you've been able to bring in lots of those ideas and concepts that you had in previous roles, particularly in HE. And just one more sort of scene setting question. Where would you say HRUC is in terms of the organization's AI journey?
I think at the moment, so I think we're I would say not right at the beginning. We're already started that journey. And one of the main things I think the organization are looking to do is really be this, as I say, sector leads in this space, and certainly right out from our CEO. So I know you've met Richard in terms of Keith Smith, really understanding the importance of embracing AI, doing that with our eyes open, but ultimately, say, building it into our strategic thinking. So for me, as I say, in the technology, as Devin just formed a new technology strategy, AI is absolutely one of those enabling pillars. And we've already got some small pockets of activity going on in terms of unlocking some tool sets that are driving some of those kind of operational efficiencies that I've referenced. But from an architectural perspective, really looking at our data sets, where data resides, and then trying to streamline that in terms of its the underlying technology stack so that we can really start leveraging larger scale AI transformation across the group as well. So yeah, we're in the thick of it.
Yeah, and you've mentioned the D word as well.
I have, yeah, the data word. I think that's the bit, is if you're trying to educate colleagues around that. If you sprung up AI tomorrow, great, on a mainstream, let's call it, you just got to be mindful about how mature your data sets are, where is your data, and ultimately, what AI will surface some useful things, but also, if you're not careful, can also get some gotchas as well.
Yeah, some wrong things, some dangerous things, you name it. It's all in the mix once you start using AI to showcase all the data in your organization, things like Copilot does and others. That's wonderful. And we'll talk a little bit later on about how you're, as a college, trying to inspire and encourage other colleges around their own AI journey.
Absolutely.
So folks might be expecting us to talk about ChatGPT today, and I'm sure it will come up at some point in the conversation. But our topic is more about intelligent automation. And do you want to just share a bit more about your thinking around RPA, robotic process automation, and introduce that concept for those who aren't familiar?
Yeah, sure. So just for colleagues who aren't, when you talk about robots, it sounds a bit futuristic, but I say RPA has been around for several years now, and I suppose it, in the simplest form, is a form of AI. But robotic process automation really is a technology that uses software robots, or people frame them as bots, to automate repetitive rule-based tasks in business processes. These bots basically mimic what happens between interacting with digital systems and applications, just like we do in the human world. So we can all think, and certainly I've seen it when I've joined into the college spaces, coming in as a joiner to the organisation, just underlying business processes that you feel are overly complex. Some are system-led, some are manual, or some are system, then a manual, then a system process, but take up a huge amount of, operational overhead time to facilitate quite straightforward transactions from a data entry perspective. RPA, effectively, what it does is it simulates some of the interaction between keyboard and mouse and bunny hopping between systems or Excel or manual processes that's delivered in a digital format. And what it can do is simulate and replicate that as a human would do, which is to say, which is effectively simulating the same interaction that a human would do at a low level, mundane administrative task, but also being able to simulate that at scale and at pace. So the bots don't just do a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday world. They can work all day, every day, round the clock, and you can scale them up into the hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands to automate transactional activity.
That's beautifully described. And I think one example, I mentioned to you last time we spoke about robotic process automation or intelligent automation, and we'll talk more about how AI is coming into that space in just a moment, was when I was in my Oracle days, was working on the screening processes for a recruitment company, which are relatively similar to enrollment and so on in colleges. And the stark moment for me when seeing the power of this was when people are sending over identifications that are sending over, let's say a bank statement, for example, and without intelligent automation, the bank statement would be sent by email to somebody within the recruitment company to look at, and it would sit in that person's inbox or the shared inbox until somebody got to it, which could be 10 minutes, could be 2 days, and then it gets read, and they open up the attachment and they go, this bank statement is 9 months old. We need a bank statement that's under 6 months old. So the email goes back, doesn't it? Dear sir, madam, can you please upload this again? And then it sits in that person's inbox for 10 minutes, 10 days until it comes back. And RPA would immediately be scanning the inbox for the organization, read the attachment, work out whether or not it's a valid bank statement, and then process it immediately or respond immediately within seconds or minutes to say, this is the change that we need. And that time savings, massive when you think about opportunities like that, isn't it, Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good scenario that you've just referenced there. So your Oracle days and effectively the concept of how I'm looking to what's the use case for education, and what's our core, one of our key activities and core activities of the year. Is enrollment, and exactly that. You know, it's one time of year where we get exam results released. Students immediately want to come through that enrollment experience. That's that first interaction, that first touch point they will have with us as an organization. And you're exactly right when it comes around to, you know, uploading of exam results, passport, photo validation, etc. And maybe the answer is so potentially even early interactions via email and so on. And the same applies in terms of this scenario you've just referenced there, Richard, around that, you know, no matter how much you do that online or in a digital fashion, it still requires a form of validation to be able to get through those different stage gates to becoming from, let's say, from prospective student through that applicant journey into the fully enrolled state. And one of the things I observed last year, joining with a college, and actually having just come freshly out of enrollment at the university. So I had 2 enrollments last year, one in HE, one in FE, but was really just observing just that enrollment experience for the organisation. And it was one of the things I did realise, it was very much done physically on the day. Kind of thousands of students turning up all at once, having to queue up to go through a physical enrollment process, which I felt was which wasn't a great first impression for students as it came to the organisation. It certainly was a bugbear of our senior team. And I just realised at that point that things need to change. This just simply isn't sustainable and not a great first impression of us as an organisation, particularly as I'm coming to, you know, to take on the challenge of transforming that technology piece. So one of the things that we've done is at the moment is we're sort of looking at how underlying what is that student journey when it comes to that initial touch points with us, mapping that out. But basically trying to put, as I say, functionality that sits outside of our core student information system back into the student information system and trying to drive that experience online. And when I say that, is trying to go to the online portal, their website initially, having been able to go to the student mobile application and then going through some of those processes that happen physically on the day via the mobile app. And ultimately, that's great, you know, in terms of some of those uploads, you know, validation or proving of your GCSE results, being able to take your photo, much the same as you do when it comes to your driving license or passport and so on online. And then also any other sort of validation checks when it comes around to, you know, residencies and things like that. But a lot of it, if you look at the ultimate churn, is the large proportion of it is the happy path. It should just be rinse and repeat process transaction. And we've done a heap of work that we're doing for this year to try and, as I say, turn off some of the bespokeness applications that we built outside of the student information system and put that functionality back into it and really trying to drive that digital means. But the biggest concern is whilst we're doing a lot of technology changes, the underlying operational shift as well. And then when we do all of this kind of this uploading and onboarding digitally and online, it still is requiring a level of validation, particularly when it comes around to someone actually having to look at the back end. You know, you uploaded your docs, someone's in the college still logged onto a PC going, oh, I can see, yes, Alex has done this, and this, observing it, checking it, and then saying, yes, now you're ready to go through to the fully enrolled state. why can't we use, instead of having a huge amount of operational overhead and staff doing that, and particularly when it all comes at once, which it will do upon a results release day, why could we not use RPA to facilitate some of those validation checks in exactly the same format that you've just referenced, Richard, with your Oracle scenario, to improve that enrollment process, quicker time to transaction, better experience for the student. And really, if there is a trend that breaks that happy path in terms of just tick boxing validation processes, we can then gear those more complex cases over to our core staff, those subject matter expertise, who aren't sitting there doing validation and transactional checks, but have the capacity to be able to give that personalized experience for those students who do need a bit more of a deeper dive. But even right down to query management, as you say, RPA isn't just done that transaction. It's intelligent and has the capability to actually simulate and replicate human interaction when it comes around to things like emails and messaging and so on. So we're really, as I say, done a great job at mapping out that process. We're working closely with some RPA providers. And the good news is we've said it's almost having to almost slow ourselves down, because we could almost end up automating absolutely everything. And the problem at this stage is probably also, going back to my people process, is trying to say, well, actually, what's the quickest time? Where's the highest level of value and reward? Looking at those bits, doing a really good job for this year, and then probably biting off a little bit more next year as well. But what I think I am very keen to do, and I have absolutely promised it to our organisation, that we're not going to have 4-hour queues, boiling hot sunshine, and lots of frustrated staff, student and parents when it comes round to just trying to, get these guys into our organisation.
Yeah, I love that. And you think about the morale and just starting out on the right foot in these cases. But what does that mean in sort of real terms? Every college wants to see those student numbers go up and those revenues associated with those go up. Do you think this could meaningfully make a difference to that?
I absolutely do, because why would you, as I said, I've seen it firsthand. When you do the first, it's like if you do in the real world, first, you only get one chance at a first impression. I think, and if you turn up, and I actually know this for a fact, it's not just in specifics, but as a whole, and it was the same in universities, and it's the same in colleges. If you have a poor experience at the outset, what's to say about and it puts you off right at the very beginning. What's to say that you're not going to end up going somewhere else to go and study if it's not great there? But equally, if you have a really good experience and people say, oh, why do you go to your college? And people talk, it's recommendation, it's word of mouth. You say, do you know what? My enrollment process was just seamless. I only turned up to collect my lanyard on the day. It was great, all done online. Yeah. Oh, how did yours go? Oh, I turned up and I spent half a day in a boiling hot sunshine just trying to get, and then queuing at a zebra printer and a webcam to get an ID badge made. It's, it's really, it makes a big difference. And equally, I hope when it comes to transforming the technology stack, just another reason to be proud of why the choice of college that you're going to. So I think it absolutely does. And again, back to those principles around the use case at the beginning, it's driving operational efficiencies, not to replace people or to take jobs away, but to give them opportunities to deliver value and do things differently. There's no point in having a huge team who are just sat there, just constantly, firefighting or weighed down with manual overhead. Enrollment's an example. You could have endless processes where it can be done within finance, within HR, within estates, facilities, even IT. It's picking those use cases and freeing up the capacity to do things and tackle some of those underlying business challenges differently.
Yes, beautifully put, Alex. Thank you. And I just want to mention that we're in good company here in the room. So just hello again to Jason, Mark, Sarah, Phil, Ali, Christina, and Roddy. Mark, I couldn't help but notice you nodding there in sort of resonance to what Alex was saying. You share some of those experiences?
Yeah, I think Alex is absolutely right. That student journey, particularly around that enrollment piece. But in my head, I'm thinking a lot of other case studies as well, where robotic AI would absolutely help to drive some of that efficiency and take away some of that manual work that we do, and remove all that. The we're constantly striving to improve that experience for that first time visit for students, even before enrollment back to application stage. And that's something that resonates very strongly with us.
Thanks, Mark. Do pop any questions in the chat, or just put your hand up here in the room if you want to add a comment or ask a question of Alex and I. Alex is monitoring LinkedIn Live as well, so do feed any questions or comments into this group as well so that we can capture those and address them. There's so much to get excited about in there as well, and one aspect we haven't touched on too much yet is ESOL and supporting those who don't speak English as a first language during that process. Again, is something that AI and automation can make a big difference with.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think going back to this, just thinking the accessibility side of things when it comes to whatever you're doing in terms of digital transformation, let's coin it as. ESOL students, as well as going through that if you put it all online and it's all written in English, is that just going to make matters more complex for them in terms of that first interaction, that first touch point. So where we're looking to do is, whilst actually even improving the underlying experience from that human interaction at the moment by applying AI across our digital platforms, and mainly with that new enrollment portal, to actually do that. The obvious thing is to make it multilingual, to give it to change the text into terms of I think it's 60 plus languages now, but also building that in terms of potential. I got told off for using the word chatbot, so I'll use it in terms of a digital assistant. But when they're going through the underlying onboarding process, to have a virtual assistant effectively that can interrogate some of the processes or some of the data sets and ask reminders, helpful notifications in a potential learner's home language. But it can also, give you means of integration with other translation tools, simplifying that processes, but making it more familiar and accessible for ESOL students. So there's a whole variety of different manners of where AI can complement and improve that underlying experience for those particular learners.
Yeah, there's so much in there, and they particularly can have a very bad experience, as we've seen in the past. And this kind of opportunity lends itself, doesn't it, to apprenticeships and adult education. And I'll touch on a use case just there in a moment. I did some sums. Actually, I used ChatGPT's reasoning engine and asked, what's the opportunity here if we looked at 5% savings across back office staff in FE colleges, not through letting anybody go, but just through natural attrition over time, and maybe where hires are thought to be needed and aren't needed going forward. 5%, according to those sums, will be worth £80 million to the sector. And I think, stepping back a second and looking at what's happening with the NHS, I think we've got to go and grab those savings now, but we've got to do it on our terms. And we do not want it to be done to us in the coming months or years, where the finger starts being pointed at areas of inefficiency and the disruption is untenable. So we have a roadmap and a timeline, I think, Alex, don't we, as a sector, to do these things on our terms, would you say?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And I think, as I said, some of these, whilst AI is very much topical at the moment, and more so generative AI being certainly more fresh in mind, some of this stuff has been around for some time as well. And as I say, it really is. And I think for us in terms of timeline, time is now, to be totally honest. I think we're always tasked. There's always more work, and there's always less people. And it doesn't matter where I've worked, it was always the same scenario. And throwing people at problems isn't always going to fix things. What we're looking to do is to drive those efficiencies, really. And in terms of being able to get to that, is to slow down for a second and actually say, well, we all know systems aren't great. It will take time to streamline them. Some of it's big ticket, some of it's going to be a little bit disruptive. But ultimately, we can all say that processes aren't as efficient as they could be. And I say, well, when was the last time we actually stopped and tried to process map them? Have we ever actually sat there and actually did a kind of workflow joined up kind of drawing of our current processes to visualize just exactly how inefficient it is? And actually, you'll be amazed at how many people just say, oh no, we've never done that, or well, we've never had capacity, we've never had time. Well, actually, why don't you slow down, sit there, and you can do it as simply with, simple as stickies on a board or a Miro board or something along those lines. So actually sit there and map out those processes. You'll be amazed at just how much levels of inefficiency are in there, but will be unnecessary activity, potentially duplicative activity, things that you can immediately, even without any change, to take out. But ultimately, and once you have processed kind of an as-is scenario, then you can really think about what the to-be would look like. And some of that might be achievable quicker than you think. Some of it might mean that you have to start thinking about potential kind of programs or projects of activity. And some of that will, as I say, be framed over periods of time. But ultimately, as I say, whilst that can be can be more complex and require investment and specialist resources, there are things that you can do, like robotic process automation, that can be opened up and unlocked really, really quickly. That can actually start, immediately unlock value. And it might be out there to do all of that process, but it certainly will be able to do a good proportion. That then means that actually, as an organization, you are freeing up that internal capacity to deliver the required change that you need. And that's ultimately really the principle of what I'm trying to get to. I mean, I got the use case here. I think for me, the most important thing that makes me tick and why I love working in education is really improving the underlying student experience. Students are always at the forefront for me. And that's why I think enrollment is such a key activity to get right. I'm starting to look at things like exams as well. I think examinations is just a hideous process, but in its current state or form. But I think I really want to conquer the whole exam provisioning and timetabling and so on. And timetabling, veterans timetable is another kind of room bookings, room utilization and optimization is another sore spot. It was in the university and it absolutely is in the college. There was never enough rooms, never enough classrooms. And how can I prove that is that really the case? Are we really efficient in our rooms and so on? And things where it comes to, we've got the data sets, it's trying to put that into a visual format that makes sense, and then applying the levels of AI over the top of it to help to actually really give us these data-driven decision makings rather than someone's opinion. And that's really gets me excited as well.
Yeah, it'd be great to dig into those a bit more as we have time today as well. And just, we talked about efficiencies, but I also touched on growth as well earlier on. And so for those who don't know, we are Morality and Knowledge and Artificial Intelligence, and we've had a not-for-profit arm for several years now that's done a lot of work around AI ethics and policy around the world, and even with the UN and so on. And over the last 2 or 3 years, we've used our consulting arm to work very much in the education space, looking at strategy. And yes, our 2 focus areas tend to be cost savings and compliance, but that doesn't leave growth off the table at all. And I'll give you one quick example. Alongside that work, we've actually been delivering adult education skills courses around operational AI for several years now. And there's one college that we work with, one large college group. And I would estimate that about 20% of those that register for one of our courses end up actually on the course. And some of those wouldn't be eligible, of course, fine. But I think many of them report to us that the process just hasn't really worked for them. And I think this is exactly where the technology comes in. And one exciting avenue of this, and it isn't RPA, but it certainly leans on that sort of technological process mapping, is to use voice. And it's not that difficult now to set up an outbound calling platform from your Azure stack that would just take the simple sheet of registrations and it would phone them. And with 11 Labs technology and others, it can do this. And we need to just tread carefully. And it would call out and it would say, see, you've registered. I want to just go through some eligibility with you. Are you a UK resident? Do you live in this area that we're working with? Et cetera, et cetera. Yes, no, record those answers. And then it would apply the next steps in terms of sending them over the right forms and so on, or letting them know that they weren't eligible for this kind of course. And frankly, I think the college is just too busy to make those calls or send those emails. So we're losing out on those people that want to do the course, and we're losing out on the revenue, which is significant. And I think across just that AI course and just that college group, I would estimate there's about £50,000 of revenue there that's being left off the table. So I think what I want to point out with that example, Alex, is that traditionally robotic process automation, RPA, has been more advantageous for larger organizations because it's come at a higher cost, and also in terms of internal resourcing requirements around capabilities, knowledge, and protection and security around that. But we are seeing the AI labs offer us some entry points into automation that might lower the cost of doing it. For example, OpenAI has talked about computer use. Claude has their own versions as well from Anthropic. These could be quite lean and effective ways of looking at automation going forward.
Yeah, I can pick up on that, and I think you're right. I think typically where if you were to go 7 or 8 years ago, you probably would have thought, well, RPA is not, it's not the right size fit. It's expensive, as you say, and it probably was, and used for large scale corporate kind of investment groups and so on. But the good news is, and as I say, when it comes around to kind of saying, well, it all sounds great, is it realistic in terms of, could our college afford it? Could our IT team be able to pick it up and deal with it? And the answer is yes. I think that's the good news is, and you gave some good examples there, Richard, is there has been, and there are various providers out there now who acknowledge and actually build it into their own strategic thinking, is around giving something back to the sector, and have built almost built these I call it tools around our specific use case, and that's really where those providers, in terms of edtech providers, or have strategically joined up with institutions to actually underpin what those business challenges are, and then build the technology specifically around those use cases. You can get almost pre-built bots to a degree that are specifically built around our framework. And that's what I'm saying is, it's whilst you still absolutely need to apply that to your own your own institution, you can these things aren't almost going in with a blank canvas and then trying to start it from the beginning. They're already there pre-built with a level of algorithm that can ultimately knows and understands our operational flows, our activities, our data sets. And as I said, you can be spinning this stuff out in, I won't ambitiously say weeks, but I'll say no more than a couple of months to unlock some of that value. But I will stress, as I say, the starting point really is to slow down and do those process maps. And you don't necessarily, I'd say, everyone is fortunate to have some business analyst roles or functions in their team, but just sit there and just actually walk through that underlying user journey yourself. Go through it, walk through that prospective applicant journey, that enrollment piece. Create a dummy account and do it, and just sit there and map those steps. And it can be as simple as this, a sticky that you probably got on your desk right now, and put it on the wall, and then start switching and changing things around. But yeah, to your point is, as I say, it is, I've seen it, and I'm working on it, and I'm applying that over our enrollment experience for this year. And I'm absolutely confident that it's going to, even if we chip away at it bit by bit, whatever the outcome is, it's going to be a lot better than having those 4-hour queues that we experienced last year.
Yeah, and you'll learn some lessons along the way and share some things and see what others are doing. And
absolutely,
we've got to move as a collective here as well as individuals. I mean, we don't want some colleges, I suppose, that are light years ahead of others. It starts to create a very disjointed sector, I suppose, Alex.
It does, yeah. And I know we Lucy covered, I'm happy to do, we can come back to a little bit later, Richard, just around what we as HRUC are doing to try and acknowledge that and overcome it, perhaps.
Yeah, let's get to that through one of the elephants in the room, which is the legacy systems that so many colleges are dealing with. Yeah. To say, we work with several colleges, and the absence of APIs in those systems or any sort of AI capabilities being built in, it really holds back, and it means that we're relying on external systems, people going out to ChatGPT, which has its own security issues. Colleges having to pay expensive Copilot licenses to make up for some of those shortcomings. Well, what are the challenges and opportunities, do you think, with shifting this big burden of the legacy platforms that we're on?
Yeah, well, there's a few things around that, I think, and certainly, I think it's one of these things. You come fresh into an organisation, you're asked a couple of questions that say, well, why have we got that system? I don't know. It's here when I joined, and then you'll say, why do we do it? Why do we do it that way? I don't know. We've always done it that way. And then you start coming in as a senior technology leader trying to say, well, actually, it wouldn't be great. Let's come out and try and do things differently. Let's challenge some of these systems. Some of the observations I've seen within the sector, and it was within both FE and HER reference, was that people over the years have ended up bespoking or creating their own. And here is an example within our college group at the moment. Our engine of the organisation is always the student information system. It drives pretty much the operational activities across the organisation. What I've seen is over the years, and it's not a criticism, it's just it might have been the right thing at the time, is the teams have built their own applications and systems outside of that student information system, which at the time might have been, an enablement and maybe deemed better even in terms of what the functionality was within the student information system. But here we are kind of a decade later, and these things are starting to become creaky, starting to become technical debt, and the guys who built them and supported them may or may not have moved to be around in the organization anymore. But we've embedded them into our underlying operations. And that is a risk. It's a huge risk to the organisation, and it's not sustainable and something that needs to be reworked. So I think there's a lot of technical debt kicking around, and probably that's been problematic in terms of both the staff and student experience, because the systems aren't either architected or designed or to go back to data flows efficiently. And that has a huge impact in terms of the operational process. The other point I think I've referenced, certainly even more so in my short time in further education, is a lot of the providers of an FE haven't really delivered cloud instances of their solutions. I've noticed a lot of the core systems I've seen have all been running on-prem, whether that's physically in a server room on site or in your own cloud environment, I'll call it. But it's still the operational overhead of the local IT team to support and maintain that system. There has been the point, but some certainly colleges have been able to, because they are, let's call it, localized databases, then tap in and pull the data directly out of it, i.e. from SQL, and being able to use things like SQL integration service, SQL reporting services. And that's been good, and they've become quite dependent in terms of having access to those data sets and ease to be able to pull whatever they want, not necessarily having to go and ask permission to do so. Where I'm seeing it now is cloud these core providers within the sector are suddenly now going, well, actually, we are going to deliver software as a service. We're going to end having on-premise instances of this, and everything now is going to be a subscription. We want one version, and it's easier for them to operational overhead to manage, maintain. They don't want all this bespokeness and into the hundreds that they've got at the moment. And whereas an IT person, you'll get a leader, you're going, yeah, great, cloud first, absolutely. But then you do get into the variance between the considerations to say, well, actually, then you are going into APIs. You're not having necessarily these direct database access that you've had for many, many years. And things need to be done differently, ultimately, which is what I'm trying to get to. And that, for me, is really a big stepping stone and learning curve for some organizations, particularly where people have been used to doing things in a certain way for very long periods of time. So what I'm saying is, whilst that goes through, there are things that we've embedded into our operational activities. There is data that we've become dependent on, and suddenly this, as we do go through this transformation in terms of where these providers are, they're having to go almost work for them, rather than them working for us. Is being able to then really come together as a sector and a community to make sure whatever they're doing in terms of their product roadmap and activities is catered with us as a sector and all of our considerations as a collective, and that we're not having to suddenly to try and change or transform or do things that are unaffordable or going to be disruptive for the organization, and come together as a community to help shape the direction of what that looks like. And that's really where coming into when they do this, if we are going to do things differently, we're not going to be able to have as much access to the freedom to be able to do what we wanted to do as we may have done over the last decade, is really trying to say, well, actually, to shape those conversations, leveraging things like automation and AI to drive those efficiencies. But ultimately, trying to give us the access to it's our data and the fact that we should be able to pull and leverage that as our free will. And that's some of the considerations that I'm certainly seeing, particularly I think student information systems are seeming to be going down the cloud or the SaaS route. I'm seeing it we're doing for an HR system upgrade here at the moment. We've had that running locally, and now that's suddenly going over to SaaS. And so, of course, core data of any education body is always your staff data and your student data. And then you get into kind of mastering that master data management piece so that it's consistent when it comes into upstream systems and so on. Sooner or later, it's not going to be, we've got a cloud version. It's going to be, no, you are going to go cloud version. We don't support the on-premise instance anymore. And that happened in my last role a lot. And I'm starting to see that picking up. FE now, we haven't really looked at FE or kind of looked at the product roadmap, and you've got the likes of, I won't name them, but some of the big providers that probably in your organization suddenly catching on and now suddenly starting to do these big moves, big bold changes and transformations that they're ultimately going to impact your organization at some point in the near future.
Yeah, and I think it's on everybody, isn't it, to keep improving those capabilities across all sectors, really, as AI makes things more possible, easier and cheaper and so on. I think clients like yourselves have expectations now that they're going to see things come down in cost or stay the same in cost and increase in capabilities. And I think it's a realistic expectation. I wanted to ask you just a bit more about inspiring and encouraging others and what sort of things you're doing. I mean, of course, I would count this as one of them, spending some time here to share your story, and I hope we can do more of this. I think one opportunity for an organization like ours, which has a background of over 6 years now working on these sort of projects, but also with its philanthropic arm, is that there are opportunities for organizations like ours to become enablers, taking some of the best things from individual colleges and not just sharing those, but actually giving a way into that for colleges technically and operationally. And that excites me to think about that as an idea.
Yeah, I was going to just touch on. I think as it says, he's going back is working a bit more smarter, a bit more strategically between organisations, and certainly when it comes to opportunities where like things like shared services, some of these skill sets, they're deemed expensive. Some of the teams need to be upskilled, but ultimately is why can't we work a bit more strategically within our sector to share some of these the initiatives, but the skills and services to actually deliver them.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so we can keep talking about ways and opportunities to do that and inspire and encourage others. What are your priorities then? You've mentioned enrollment. Obviously, we talked a lot about that. You touched on exams and timetabling. Is there a list somewhere in your office on a whiteboard or something that says 1, 2, 3? This is where we're.
Yeah, I know, that's a long list, but yeah, no, it is. And that's really coming out in terms of trying to recently formulate let's call it a technology strategy, but it was probably more so contributing to a kind of more of a digital strategy. So yeah, I think the main things really where I'm focusing on. I mentioned this getting into in terms of strategic pillar alignment. I think AI is absolutely out there. I think we're seeing a lot of brandishing of what people call immersive technologies with augmented reality and virtual reality and classroom of the futures, and effectively trying to bring some technology capabilities into the campuses that moves away from traditional kind of whiteboard front of classroom delivery. But if I go back to it, to kind of the main big ticket things, is so yes, I've talked about enrollment. I've talked about exams and timetabling, but really I'm also going to go back to kind of I suppose call it smart campus as well. And I call smart campus in its simplest form is trying to give the campuses a bit more of a pulse when it comes to improving that underlying experience for both staff and student as they engage with our campuses. Cross collaboration opportunities as a group. We've got 3 colleges, but we've got 5 campuses, and how do we help thinking about fixing underlying business problems like oversubscribed on students, which is a great problem to have, but we don't have enough teachers to be able to deliver our bread and butter when it comes to education delivery. One of our challenges around attendance is, and it goes back to time to exams, is it's really difficult to if students get gaps in their timetable classes. What system we've all been students ourselves is if you've got a 3 hour or 4 hour gap interval between sessions, it's really easy for them to drift off campus and then not come back in the afternoon. But when you're looking around in some of our largest student dwelling areas, there's not really any kind of means or technology helping to give them that focus as to why they would want to stay on campus away from, just meeting friends and having a coffee. So I think Smart Campus is probably another thing which is huge. And that really, for me, is building the bridge back between underlying estates and facility systems and IT. Joining up, if it can be network, we should be networking, we should be reporting on it, effectively putting that, anything that can be networked, putting that into a repository, again, interrogating that data set, applying levels of AI over that to then inform our decision making around things like utilization, optimization, digitalizing the campus from its CAD drawings into kind of graphical format, and then overlaying data sets on top of that to bring meaningful interaction and insights into that campus experience for students. A bit like going into the library, and they go into the library and want to find a book on psychology. They can't find there's a mounted or rows and rows of books. They look over at the service desk and there's somebody, there's 15 people all queuing up to try and get to the one member of staff who can help. And actually should be pulling their phone out and going, oh, where's the book on psychology? And pinpointing you precision where you are. Oh, it's 3 rows above on the top right-hand shelf corner, as a kind of one scenario, to being able to go, well, actually on your phone, knowing that actually you've just had your lunch, and if you've got to get over the other side of the campus or another building, if you don't leave now, you're going to be late for your class. Getting a bit of a poke, so on you go to exactly that. Going to be able to get a notification to be incentivized to go to the next location, or an efficient notice saying, well, actually, we've got as you're walking past a coffee shop, there's a promotion on. We know that your favorite coffee you have every day. Do you want to order it now? Click this button, and instead of having to queue up and order it, it's there on the counter with your name on it. You just grab it and go, kind of thing.
Alex, I'm coming back to college.
Little things. Let's go back to my hospitality here, but it's these little things. Yeah. I'm saying is we've got the data. It's out there. You've got it right now. It's trying to put it in, to get that into a location, centralized repository. And then manipulating that data and using things like AI to be able to really interrogate that data sets, tell you things you didn't already you didn't know, or being able to answer your queries, and then pushing that into the hands of your end users, which is your learners. Whether you've got a mobile app, or you can do it. I think most people do. If they don't, then you can do it in another manner. But these little helpful reminders, these little prompts that give you a reason, a kind of we care kind of reason, explanation as to and know about you as an individual to improve your underlying experience. To also being able to helps define what our strategic thinking is when it comes down to curriculum, when it comes down to our real estate investments, and to ultimately shape what the technology strategy is as the third branch. So, but yeah, I might have been a long answer to your question. I think I think it's underlying student experience, it's driving operational efficiencies, and it's trying to unlock the data to try and help define some of our thinking and challenge people's views versus fact.
Yeah, big goals, but as you say, incremental opportunities to get there. And I think back to my college days. I was at Cricklade College, now Andover College, and it is something of a sea change. I left our school that didn't have a sixth form and arrived at college, and clearly I could wear whatever I wanted for the first time in my life. But the thing I noticed the most, this might sound silly, is that at school, nobody held the door open for you. Students let the door close in your face. And immediately, those same people at college would hold the door open. And it's something of a mindset shift as you go, mindset shift from school to college. And I think what you're describing is really just getting closer to the world of work and the expectations and how you interact with one another and how technology supports you. And I'm not saying we want colleges to look like, the Oracle, Helicon building specifically, but it doesn't hurt, I guess, Alex, does it, to make it closer to that real environment?
Of course it is, yeah, and that's absolutely, and that's also what we're doing. We are preparing students for the real world. We want to make sure that we've got industry standard technologies in the first instance, so they're familiar when they go into the workplace of what they're expecting from day one. But ultimately, I haven't really thought about it like that. I think you're completely right, actually. Just the levels of human interaction, levels of I suppose, yeah, engagement with communities and people, and that's just, what we expect. And I think that's a really good analogy that you put that together on that basis, and how technology could help influence it also. But ultimately, yeah, exactly that. What we want is we're preparing, from an employer perspective, getting their next level, their next round of employees well equipped, ready for them to help them on their journeys. But ultimately, we're also using the technology to raise awareness in terms of industries and sectors that people may be less familiar with, unless they had an already existing association. So yeah, it's all about that, and we've listed this, some of the examples of what colleges are doing at the moment. They go on about the AR and VR capabilities as well, transitioning 4 walls on the campus into a kind of real digital, real-time experience that simulates an environment that students wouldn't typically get access to in the real world. And then learning from those insights in terms of how students behave, interact, applying automation and AI intelligence over those data sets. And ultimately, it helps us as a college, helps drive our curriculum, but also it might actually be useful for employers as well.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it joins the dots, doesn't it? I like the way you put that. I've got 2 last questions. The first one is there any sacred cows? Is there anything that you wouldn't touch with technology or AI in the college?
That's a good question. And they say, I think that you've got to always, I'm mindful around running or being truly trusting in terms of AI over things like informing student outcomes and scoring coursework or examinations. I'll be totally honest with you. I don't know if others may disagree. I just think there's certain elements where I think there's always needed to be some, to just say, well, there's no more human, we're going to just score our exams using an AI tool. We're just going to end up, marking people's coursework, and, you're never going to get a human validation of what your score is, and being confident that the AI is absolutely going to be 100% accurate. I think that's my own view. I think there still needs to be a level of human interaction, engagement, just because of the fact, it's like anything, you see a report, and they just show the report enough, people will just believe that the report must always be accurate. It's only when someone interrogates the data and goes, oh, by the way, actually that data was wrong, and you go, oh, really? And people will go away and correct it, or will never know, just because there's just an element of trust, or the report must always be right. I think the same for me would apply in terms of, well, if AI was going through and ultimately impacting potential life outcomes, I would be mindful. I'm not saying it can't get there. I just think I would be a little bit mindful around that right now.
Yeah, and I just think personally, why start there? Yes, there's absolutely loads that can be done. It can make a huge difference to the students and the teachers' time. But that's not the place to dive in, surely. And I interviewed Gert Kortemeyer from HRUC and Michigan State University, and he put some essays from the 1980s into some AI verification plagiarism checks, and they came back positive. They said, yes, this student has used AI on this work. It just shows you the absurdity, really. And I guess if we don't trust AI not to hallucinate, I'm not sure why we would trust it necessarily to mark our work just yet. And then the last question is, we've been joined with some great companies today, but there's usually 200 or 300 people that will watch this LinkedIn Live afterwards. Some of this is going to sound intimidating, I guess. So what would you say in terms of entry points and starting points to those who think, Alex, you're so far ahead of where we're at?
I would just pick something small. I would pick a proof of concept. I would prove it in principle, something that's not going to disrupt or create, have detrimental impact if it goes wrong. Pick a use case that you can play around with. It's okay to get it wrong, but it's small enough to prove that in theory that it works. Feel more confident with it, and then start taking on chunks at a time, start showcasing more so, and building that confidence level that's the right thing for you. If you try and tackle something head on, either you haven't done it before, or you don't understand your systems or your processes, or the people aren't coming along with you, I would I'm not saying you can't do it, but you're upping the levels of risk associated to something that ultimately might have backfire. But look, as I say, on the reverse, if you don't take one step forward and move in this space, then ultimately in time you will fall behind, and you have to weigh up that price of standing still. What is it if we do just stand still? Is people going to leave us behind? And the sort of rear view mirror kind of piece, and ultimately, I guess what your students and students expect. I think most, this is the world we're in, and I think there's an expectation that things should be done in a more kind of digital, transformative fashion.
I like that, and there's plenty of those starting points, and happy if people want to reach out to us. I'm sure you're available on email from time to time to support, and likewise myself. And we can talk about what those entry points are. We've got 5 minutes, so we can either give folks back 5 minutes of the day, or I wonder if there's a question here from the group that's here on Zoom or on LinkedIn Live. We've got 5 minutes for a question, so happy to check whether Jason, perhaps you have one, or Ali, Mark, Roddy, others. Ali, have you switched your camera on with a question, or just so we can see you?
Thank you. Yes, I have a question. Thanks, Alex, for the brief. I have just a question. Probably I cannot find it in the book. Alex can help me in answering that. It's when you consider AI in college or university, I'm just worried about the kind of resources you have. Human resources can handle that. Do you get off-the-shelf software or tools, or you are trying to develop that in-house to get data scientists to help you on that? Because that's really a crucial question in terms of that. So what do you think about that?
Yes, really good question. The answer is I absolutely no. I think there's a bit of both to begin with. I think what I'm trying to do and longer term is to bring the in-house capability. And absolutely looking at potentially resourcing data scientists. We also looking at our graduates and seeing if students, because they say a lot of this stuff is relatively new. You're not going to have someone necessarily who has years and years worth of experience in it. But actually, the best resources might actually be graduates within your own institution. But to answer it initially, I think what I'm doing is working. To begin with, because we're looking at what a longer term kind of operating model could look like, and even to free up that capacity within my own team to do less firefighting and more about the value, upskilling my own engineers who already have some of that capability to be able to do some of this stuff. So I think it's a bit of both to begin with, but my longer term ambition is to absolutely bring that in-house capability to just constantly deliver value. There are other colleges who already are doing it all in-house. I met with only one this morning, and they've done a heap of, they're using the Microsoft stack, building all the, not going out and buying pre-made tools, they're building them all themselves because they've got a couple of young engineers, let's call it, who aren't far off being graduates themselves, who are in there just getting it, reading a book, going on the online courses, and just churning out AI capabilities and releasing constant value, small-led, value-led initiatives that some of these vendors are trying to sell us. And that's kind of, I was like, wow, it's made me really envious. That's exactly what I want to do. I'd rather have take 2 team members off and free them up if I had the capacity, upskill them and get them to start delivering that creativity and those value-led solutions, and less worried about keeping the lights on is really what I want to get to.
You might have another issue when you have in-house skills. The industry will offer them a high salary which you cannot afford them. That's another problem to have.
I think that's everywhere, though, isn't it? It's just why it's having a high value-led proposition, isn't it? So I think it's in terms of, why do you want to work, particularly on Greater London, or for a college, or go and work in Central London for a big bank? I think, and that's really, I just say it's like, why do we all do it? Because the value isn't in terms of making people rich. It's about what you're giving back and seeing firsthand in terms of the impact it has to your students, and that's what makes me tick. But you're right. You can upskill people, and they're become in demand. It's, you know, not just you know, in education. It's just as a whole. I think it's everywhere at the moment. People want these skill sets, these capabilities. You know, and I'm looking at vendors trying to sell me tools, and I'm thinking that's really cool. But then I'm looking at a college who's got, you know, a couple of graduates who built pretty much the same quality, and going, "Hey, do you want us to show you how to do it for nothing?" And I'm going, "Yes, please." Instead of going off and doing it that way, there are considerations. But yeah, you're completely right. I see it certainly in AI. I definitely see it in terms of these immersive classrooms. The AR and VR stuff is you know, great, but it's making it sustainable content creation. That kind of level of skill set as well it should be thought through when we do embark in terms of some of these investments.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ali. And we're exactly on time. So this is not the end, it's the beginning. And so happy to keep these conversations going. But for today, that's all the time we have. Alex, huge thank you for your time today, for sharing so openly and compassionately and inspiringly. I feel really energized from this conversation about where we're going next. I want to really express that gratitude.
Thanks, Richard. No, thanks everyone for either watching live or being on the call, or hopefully enjoying it in the background. So as I say, I'm on LinkedIn, Alex Denley. Emails alex.denley@hruc.ac.uk. Love to have any follow-up with anyone who would like to have a chat. Please reach out to me. And Richard, thanks so much for the opportunity to join the podcast today. Really, really grateful. Enjoyed every minute. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I wish you a fantastic afternoon.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Recording stopped.